All right. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad we're all here again. Thank you for gathering around, and thank you for all wearing the same clothes that we have worn in every single episode.
Not me.
You know, we've been doing this like arduously in the salt mines, creating this over the process of years, and just by astonishing coincidence,
I have
always wore the same clothes.
It's because we have capsule wardrobes.
Yeah,
right?
but if you pay attention, you'll notice that Chelle's hair changed. It went up, so it's like Superman.
That's your
That was
drinking
a
game.
psychology test. For
Yeah,
me.
serious.
that's the drinking game.
It's
You
getting
know,
serious now.
every time her hair is up, you take a drink. This as we're trucking along. Now we've talked about this before, actually. So we're kind of revisiting something we've already explored in a little bit of detail, but we're going to talk about defining success, which is very important because as authors, as writers, success is going to mean a multitude of different things. Some of us are going to be focused on the money more than anything. Some of us are going to be focused on how many books do I write. At one point in my life, I had an ambition to try to write more books than L. Ron Hubbard, who apparently has written the most books. He's written like 1,600 books in his career, or had written.
Has he?
Yeah, well, perhaps he used hypnotic techniques to have some of those written. But it was a goal. I'm not sure that I want to hit that. I don't want to be necessarily associated with the name in any way. But let's talk about success. And Johnny, you shared a story about your dad, and you can feel free to reiterate that. Nobody was listening.
Me on the spot.
Yeah, I decided as soon as you told me you couldn't tell that story again that I
the
have
short
to put
version,
Johnny
I was
on the
actually
spot.
covertly scanning for an article that I wrote recently where I said these are the things that I want for my success, but I can't find it on the spot, of course. So I'll just tell the story about my dad again. So the short version is that he
Success is better SEO.
That's exactly right. Well, I just was scrolling through a blog trying to find it. So he had a traditionally corporate life and a traditionally high salary to go with it, and all he wanted to do was play his guitar and just, be an artist, paint. I forgot that the first time. He's a painter. So he didn't just want to play his guitar. He wanted to paint and play his guitar. So he was trying to make time by earning a bunch of money, and then eventually kind of realized, I can just not do the job because sitting around and playing guitar and painting doesn't require nearly as much money as that highfalutin lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the thing. But I do think, and this came up at one of the earlier episodes that we were talking about, is, and I don't think we made this point super explicitly, so maybe it's worth it, is I think that a lot of presentations of indie authordom that happen at conferences or when people talk or podcasts is you're seeing the success stories and you're seeing a certain kind of success story, monetary success story. You always see somebody who's making a lot of money, sold a lot of books. And as we've established, that's a very, very small percentage of people that actually do that. But what that does is it creates this tacit assumption that that is the only definition of success. Whether you realize it consciously or not, everybody ends up shooting for, well, I'd better make at least six figures because otherwise why am I doing this? But that's why I think that this is so interesting, is looking at people's different definitions of success, which for most people is not going to be that because you're not going to get there necessarily. And it's not even the right goal to chase given what has to go into it to get there.
Yeah. Your story of your dad reminds me, I guess it's kind of an apocryphal story of a businessman going.
Apocryphal?
Yes, that's another.
Is that like an
$5
iconoclast?
So if you're tallying up and playing the drinking game, that's shot number 2 in the $5 word category. There's a story of a businessman taking a vacation. He's like a CEO, goes to Mexico. Yeah. And
Sees the guy fishing.
Sees a guy fishing.
Yep.
And I'm probably going to butcher this story altogether, but the gist of it was, he tells the guy, you should start a business. You should, get out there and you can create a franchise around this fishing boat service you have. And then eventually, and the guy keeps asking, well, what then? What then? What would I get? And it inevitably swings back around to you can retire, sit on the beach and play your guitar at your family.
Whenever you want.
Right,
Yeah,
which
go
was
fishing
the
whenever you want.
exact
Which was what
activity he was doing. Right.
Right.
So I think that's an important point is we should take a look around. What is it we're trying to achieve here? And is there a shorter route to it than I have to make six figures a year as a writer? Because I had that experience too, and I got to that six-figure number, and I had a career that I really am proud of and really like, but there was a point at which my wife and I had a discussion. We were looking for a house at one point in the Houston area, and we both had this sort of epiphany, like, why are we looking for a house here when what we really want to do is travel all the time? And it was shortly after that we sold the house that we had. We bought an RV and eventually a van, and spent years traveling the United States because that's what we wanted to do, and that was my definition of success at that time. Now I have a new definition of success, but Joe, what about you? I mean, how do you, when you think about success, well, first, what's your definition of success?
So, one thing, you talking about your story is accepting the fact that it's going to change, like conditions in your life change, right? Like, in my case, and we talked about this before, is like, I had this homemaker, forever home, built the overcapitalized the market home for my kids, and did that. And then it's like, well, now it's changed. And so with that, we re-engineered our life. And that I think is one thing that authors need to think about is like, what is it going to take to get in touch with what you really want? Right. And I think that part of that becomes, and this is something that I hope we can do with the show, is to kind of go a layer down with what success is. And what do I mean by that? Well, the opposite of kind of what is currently the model, in where you're not being led by the market and what the society says is success, but you get the self-reliance and the skill set to really be critical and say, like, what do I really want? Right. And have that conversation with the people in your family. Like, is this where we want to be with everything we're doing? And so for me, like, with talking about the success of the show, that's what I'm hoping we can build together, is this idea around success isn't necessarily about material stuff or recognition in the marketplace. It's about you having self-reliance, right? Yeah. And, we've thrown it around a lot here, the idea of financial freedom. There's a lot of authors that have a lot of money, but they don't have financial freedom, right? They can't stop writing, right? They fear what would happen if they did. In my view, financial freedom is when you have the ability to say, well, I could write this book that I'm thinking about or not. And part of that becomes the other side of the equation is like, when we work with clients, one of the scariest things we can see is expense creep, where their lifestyle starts creeping up on the money they're making.
It's also what they call Kevin.
Yes. Yeah, all the way back to high school. It's in my yearbook.
Because this is a cyclical industry, right? And at some point, you're going to burn out, genre going to change, the market's going to drop, there's going to be COVID, there's not going to be COVID, something's going to happen, and you're going to be like, oh my God, my revenues have dropped, and I've got the lifestyle that's 3x this. What do I do now?
Yeah. I think there was probably no better lesson on that topic than the pandemic. Like this sudden shift in everything, how we operate, how we think, how we interact with each other on a personal level, is everything changed. And who could have ever predicted that? Unless you were born in the early 1900s, you probably had no idea that something like that was even possible. Chelle, you've had shifts in your lifestyle and career.
Yeah.
Like, what's your definition of success?
So my definition of success came back to, I first started thinking about it when I was reading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Right.
And
the Bible of every entrepreneur in the world.
At the time, I had young children. I had little girls, and I was a workaholic. I mean, I was building my own business, and I had quit corporate life in 1999, and I was big time hustle culture. but I was burning out and I was tired and everything was down to me and it was dependent on me to make sure that everything happened. And that was my first case of burnout. And that book really helped me sort of shift and think about things differently in terms of financial, because one of the premises in his book, which I to this day live off of, is I didn't want the money to buy the car. I wanted the experience of driving the car.
Right.
I didn't want to own a vacation home. I wanted the experience of enjoying that vacation or whatever it was. It was the experience of it, not necessarily the ownership of it. And once I sort of let go of the number that it took me to get to that house, I wanted to have the experience of that. I wanted to travel and know what those things were like. So it radically shifted from earning enough money to live that lifestyle to having the experiences that lifestyle included, right? And
Yeah.
so that changed quite a bit. I started looking at things in terms of being nomadic. I started thinking of it in terms of being able to travel with my kids. We used to take our kids everywhere. I used to speak on cruise ships. We took the kids with us. We incorporate. There was no such thing as work-life balance anymore. It was just life, right? And that became, for me, the definition of success was being able to do all of those things and not think about the scary, repercussions of money or the number. It was being able to have those experiences. It also shifted for us then. We don't give traditional Christmas presents anymore. We give experiences. We give cooking lessons. We
Yeah.
give, all of these different things. That was the mind shift for me, was to find success, was experiences. It also changed in terms of our giving and there's a whole thing around that. But that was the first time that I started thinking of it. And now when I say I'm chasing success, I'm chasing the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want to do it, which doesn't necessarily mean I want to buy a castle, although I do want to buy a castle. But
Right.
but it's completely different in terms of the mind shift. And now my kids are older, right? So now I want to be able to knock off at 3:00 in the afternoon and go play with my grandbaby who lives around the corner. That's the freedom that I want.
Right. Yeah. And what I've learned over the years is if you can shift your attitude away from I need to make $10 million this year in order to have the lifestyle I want, and shift it toward I want these experiences and I'm going to find a way to get these experiences.
Yeah.
Money be damned. What ends up happening is a lot of times you don't end up needing any of the money to do it, and you also open up a whole new wealth of resources that can help you achieve all the other goals you have in your life.
I will also throw some woo in there, right? I'm a big believer in abundance and manifestation. I just am. I've seen it work in my own life. I don't want to try and convince anybody of that.
I'll try to convince you.
I mean,
I'm on her side.
I'm also on.
I just sort of know that the universe conspires. So if I get clear on what I want and I get clear on how, I feel about it, and it's equitable and it's generous, and the universe is generous back. In the last 3 years, I've seen a shift in everything in my life in terms of meeting goals that I kind of have set in the back of my mind to do things, and I haven't been disappointed yet, to be honest.
Right.
It's just the law of reciprocity and generosity.
Can I throw some philosophy on top of that?
Let's do
Because I would say,
Go ahead,
first
Marcus
of all, I'm
Aurelius.
on
Lay
board
it
with
on
the
us.
woo, but I would also say that maybe this is physiology / psychology, or psychology and philosophy, is our brains are focusing mechanisms. We don't think this. We think the world is what the world is, defined by what we see and what we experience. But if you think of the abundance of things that are going on around us, we're picking out a very, very, very small subset. And so what you're defining as being open and reciprocity and all that stuff, if you don't like the woo part of it, really it's just the more you're open to that sort of thing, you may find a way that things just happen to end up connecting in very logical and scientific ways. It's just that you were myopically focused on this one way that things needed to be, and now you're not.
Go ahead.
Well, our attentions are actually very exclusionary, more than So
That's what the brain is.
That's
it's
what
about
your brain
deleting
does.
things, not
Yes.
including
So
them.
that's why you can watch. There's a famous video of basketball players, and then it asks you at the end, did you see the gorilla? And no one sees the gorilla, despite him walking straight the hell through that.
through the thing.
So, and that's why, because what happens is you see what you focus on. And if your definition of success is purely about money and you're not receiving that money, you're never going to see yourself as a success. But if you can change that to, these are the experiences I want to have, now your attention has shifted to something else. And all these myriad new ways of achieving that open up to you.
Well, you start to see it, right? There, so I don't know what the scientific term for it is, but if you think about when you walk into your house and you suddenly smell I have wallflowers that smell like pine and balsam right now,
Okay.
but I go nose blind to it because I'm in it all the time.
Right.
Your brain has so much stimulus that is a thing that it does is filter it out. So it's why when you're thinking of buying a certain car, you start to see that car everywhere. And it's
Right.
why pregnant women see pregnant women all the time now. Like you get pregnant, you see like 10,000 pregnant people. It's because your brain is now zeroing in.
Right. It's not that they weren't there before and suddenly are.
Right.
It's that you are
Right.
suddenly noticing.
And so to Johnny's point, that is why you start to see those opportunities, is because you've decided I want to see opportunities, right? You've told the universe or told, whatever.
Your reticular. Was
Yes.
it reticular
Activating system.
Yeah.
Well, and to be a little tactical on that, when you finally do start thinking about this is what I want, and you're expressing that, there's a whole manifestation thing, but then be present to like how it manifests. Like in my case, when I'm working with clients and they start to really understand what they want, then I can say, oh, well, that's not a money problem. That's and then, I want to own a castle. Do you really want to own a castle? No, you want to hang out with your friends at a castle. You don't want to have to fix a castle the other 2 weeks you're not there. Right? You don't want the tax implications and the overhead and have to have the gardening staff and oh, you're right. Right. So I think that's when you start to really figure that stuff out and have that self-reliance of I'm confident that for the near term, this is what I want to see if this is my best life. Right. You know what? There's nothing wrong with trying it and being I don't like this. Right. I know several authors are I want to do the vagabond thing. And they do that and they realize, I'm really a homebody. I just want to be in my house and in my pajamas for 3 to 5 days. Yeah. And it's but you went out and tested it. Awesome. Yeah. And you learned, and now you can be more, you can I think part of what gets really hard for people, and I think I know I've said this to you guys before, but settling down, that is bad. You got to hustle. You got to do this. It's if I have a brain tumor and I have to go see a brain surgeon, I want that guy focused. I want him totally settled on the idea he wants to be the best brain surgeon in the world. I don't want him thinking about his life as an author. I want him thinking about brain surgeon all the time. And that goes the other way too. It's if you're really going to do this, you have to settle. You have to say these other things I'm not going to do. And that's super, super hard for a creative person because the minute you do that, you get rid of possibilities, right? It's no longer up here in fantasy world. It's and then guess what happens? You do stuff and it doesn't turn out as perfect as you thought it was. But that's cool. That's okay. It's happening. And it will eventually get to where you want it to be if you do the things that are going in that direction.
And I think, there's a definite misnomer that, a lot of us come into writing. I did this, I'm guilty of this, but we think, if I can just be a full-time writer and I can make this much money, I can do anything I want. And if you think about writing in terms of being your job, what job have you ever held that allowed you to just do anything you wanted?
Right, the job itself.
Right, there's always a limiting
even if nothing
factor.
comes from it.
Right, exactly right.
There's an amazing book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Acor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the most freeing books that I read last year in terms of defining success, because we are traditionally trained to think if this, then that. If I sell 1 million books, then I will be happy. If I lose weight, then I will be happy. If I whatever, insert whatever it is,
right,
then I will be happy. And his book scientifically, and he has a TED Talk, which of course is my love language, that more succinctly and hilariously explains it, that scientifically, if you choose to be happy first, everything else follows. The success follows.
Right.
Right. If you put yourself in the mindset, and that's one of the biggest reasons why at Author Nation we have the mindset track, right, is because we want to pay attention to that, because that is one of the first keys to success. We can teach you how to sell, teach you how to market. We can teach you how to advertise. We can teach you how to write better books. We can teach you how to do all of these things. But if you don't have the right mindset to begin with, if you're not in the mindset of being happy with what you've got, none of that other success will matter to you. And it'll be so much harder to get there, and you won't enjoy the journey. Like, you won't enjoy it up to then, because it will be a job. It will be a job the entire time.
Yeah.
So that book really helped me last year tremendously get excited about things. And, you know, even when I'm in the slog of getting the magazine out, I'm like, man, I still get to get up and play with my friends every day. Like, how cool is this?
Yeah,
is still
that's the right
coolest
phrasing,
thing.
by the way, is that get to.
I get
to
to.
do this. And I think we forget that a lot.
Yeah.
We tend to get locked in on, we focus more on what we're missing, right? Oh, I'm not making $100,000 a year as a writer, or I don't have enough readers. I only have 600 people on my mailing, or I only have 60 people on my mailing list. That was me for the first 5 years of my career. And you start focusing really a great deal more on what you don't have rather than what you have accomplished. Think about the accomplishment of just having written a book. You know, some of us in this room have written quite a few books, and we know every book is still just as hard as the first one.
So I want to know what you guys say to I'm putting myself psychically into the mind of
All right.
somebody listening to this who's jaded and who's like just had a lot of frustration. They go, oh, so you're telling me just to be happy.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that person? What do you say to the person who's like, oh, you guys are just moving pieces around. My life still sucks.
Yeah, that's a choice. I mean, that's, you know, from my perspective, and you can write me hate mail if you need to. But
I'm gonna. I do.
Start it with
my
my
perspective is
that gem pen.
it's all about choice. Every day is our choice, right? How are we approaching this day? What is it we're going to focus on? Every day when I get up, I have a series of disciplines that I started adhering to several years ago now, but you know, I have these journals I write. I write down 3 pieces of wisdom which I like to share publicly, and then I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, and then I have this whole series of 3 things I do, and all of that is a tool I use to remind myself that A, it's up to me whether I'm happy or not, and B, it's not always easy, but it is always the choice that I make. It's always my choice. And so I guess that those are really the same point. But the idea is you get to decide. The only power we have. If you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, the key message in that book was we have no power over anything in our lives except our response to what happens to us. And that if you disagree with that, I understand. I know where that comes from. And I guess right now I'm talking to that jaded person. You know, it is still, I mean, start looking at this, start talking to people, start doing some research into this. It is up to you whether you're happy. Well, happiness and joy are not quite the same thing, but I do like what Matthew McConaughey, one of our fellow Austinites, pointed out, that he doesn't focus on happiness, he focuses on joy. Because happiness is sort of transient. It can come and go depending on your circumstances. But joy is what you live with. Joy is that choice you make, and you can come back to it no matter what your circumstances are. You come back to it each day.
I think also for the jaded writer, because I was that jaded writer, like I was starting to really flame out, was I came back to a series of things that I did every day. The first thing I did was I filtered my news. I eliminated more than I added to, right? I wasn't like trying to just pump myself up. I actually had to strategically cut some things out of my life.
Yeah.
I strategically cut out news from
Yeah.
my life. And that's very privileged. I get that. Like, that is a very privileged thing to be able to not pay attention to certain things, but I choose what to pay attention to. I subscribe to newsletters that are, you know, very informational.
I want to push back a little bit on that.
Go ahead.
Because I see what you're saying, and I've gotten this because I don't listen to the news either.
Yeah.
the news is curated. I mean, that's all there is to it. And I don't mean like in a conspiracy theory.
No, it
I
is.
just mean that it's a collection of things that somebody determined we need to know about.
Yep.
It is not life. It is
Yeah.
part of life.
Right.
But so many people act as if this is life. And I just don't like to give it disproportionate power. It's not that I want to stick my head in the sand. It's that I don't want to use that curated list of usually bad things to define my picture of what existence is.
Right.
So,
Go ahead, Joe.
and if somebody's currently writing hate mail to Kevin, you may want to open up a new window for me.
All right.
Well, I mean, I got to be targeted the same approach, too.
I think what you're bringing up is specifically around the idea of I'm not satisfied with how this life as a writer is turning out, right? Like I've been writing the books, I've been going to the courses, I've been doing it, it's not working, right? So part of what has to be understood is if this market was a normal distribution, a bell curve, 50% of the people would be below average in performance
By definition.
by definition.
Right.
But it's not. It's a Pareto curve. It's a power law curve. And
Would you say that winner takes all?
Oh my God.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
For the love.
It's apparently something he says a lot.
It's
So that email address is hatemail@authorination.live.
This
Pareto curve.
market is disproportionate to the number of people that don't make money. Okay? So don't take it personal. I know it's hard. Don't take it as a personal failure. You've chosen to come into a market that is extremely difficult. And if you are seeing some success, the only way to get to the other side of where you want to be is to continue to do the things that matter. And that's working on your craft and loving on your audience. It's not anything you can do short term to juice it up. It's not about, adding 20% more advertising. It is about really basic stuff about building a brand and getting your audience to tell other people about your book, right? It's super, super hard when the product is your baby, right? It's something you created. It's hard. You take it personal when people say, I'm not that interested in it. That's in the words of Hyman Roth from Godfather 2, this is the business we've chosen.
Rare Hyman Roth.
Wow.
Okay.
So, Michael, is the money going to be on the table when I wake up? I don't know. You tell me.
I'm more interested in his cousin with the hat with the little balls. Personally.
All right.
I think just to close that loop of what we've talked about, winner take all, I think it comes back to being able to define our success.
Yeah.
And for me, the term winner is an outdated measurement of success. Winning and losing is binary to me, and I don't agree with that in terms of our industry. Now, there are market realities. I'm not disputing those, but I think that we have the opportunity when we talk about defining success to define them in terms of more intrinsic value and in terms of more personal decisions and in terms of more personal responsibility rather than just saying winner take all or winning and losing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That language implies that there's some sort of competition, and in reality, there is no competition when you get to this level or any level as a writer.
You're not talking about market competition. You're
No,
talking about
I'm
people
talking
looking
about-
and saying, you're doing better than me. Well, it doesn't matter that you do that well. Well, yes, it does,
Right.
because I need to be above them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
That's,
That
but that's
gets to-
internal.
But
Yeah.
we're going back to the question that you posed to the person that is jaded, right? What is jading them, right? It's the comparison.
Yeah.
Right? Comparison's the thief of joy. We know that. And I'm trying to help people understand that, like, you're comparing yourself to the wrong thing. You're comparing yourself to this really small group of people that are doing something. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're happy, right? And you're certainly not, because you're comparing yourself to them. So can I help you reframe this and be like, hey, you're more part of the collective of authors that are trying to figure this out. Now, here's the craziest thing. If the four of us decided that we were going to start a car company and we were just going to kind of sort of get the cars right, we were going to do our best job designing a car and put it on the road, like, we'd be out of business, right? Like, we couldn't even get started. Like, But that's not true of writing. Like you can put out your best product that you can do today and find people that are like, hey, there's some stuff here that could be better, but like, I like the story.
You're describing how I started this business.
How most people do.
Most of us, yeah.
Like I say this a lot. If your first book is your best book ever, your career is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
Because you're always chasing that monkey, right?
Right.
Right? Or you're never getting better.
Right. Yeah. If it's peaking in high school,
Yeah.
basically. All right. Well, we're at time, so we need to go ahead and wrap up. But I think I can define this as a successful podcast. So thank you all for contributing. I'm going to choose to be joyful about all of this. For those of you listening and tuning in, watching live, not watching live, but tuning in and watching on YouTube or elsewhere, I hope that you take a lot of this to heart. Like, the lesson to learn here is that you are the one who chooses what success means. Give yourself some advantages. Don't start yourself in a slump. Like, pick success that you can define and get to right away, and then you can use that momentum and build to your next success, is my theory. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you go and visit authornation.live so you can sign up for the conference in November. We hope to see you there. And until then, we'll see you next time on this show. Take care.